All right, so please help me welcome Sister Sharon Paulna, the General Superior for the Congregation of Sisters of St. Agnes, to the podium for our welcome ceremony.
Good morning, spirited women. Boy, you can just feel it in here, right? Welcome to the Sisters of St. Agnes Breakfast with Women 2024. We've had these breakfasts for many years, but each one is special. This really is one of the highlights of our year, to be with you, women with passion and amazing goodness, whose spirits have energized us, CSA, and Fond du Lac. So thank you for that. I'd like to introduce a couple of my team members. Peg Spindler is on the leadership team. Rhea Emmer, where are you, Rhea? There you are. Okay. And Madeline Jean Forte is in Milwaukee. She's unable to be with us for some personal reasons, so we miss her today. But these are the women who energize me along with other levels of leadership, the Sisters of St. Agnes, and our partners in mission. Dusty's up here, one of them. You'll see all the others around her. They really keep me going every day. So as we come together as women this morning, and we felt this sacred energy in the room, that energy comes from the sacred space within each of us. The sacred flows into and through each one of us and all creation. How important it is that we as women recognize the sacred within us so that we are able to flow that out into the world. The world so needs our wisdom, our compassion, our understanding, listening hearts that we all have, healing, and love. We are women who can tend the heart of the world, and we claim the sacred within us. We share that with others, and we recognize the sacred all around us. Everything is sacred for those who have eyes to see. So let us pray. Incomprehensible holy mystery, in the midst of all the chaos and suffering that is in our world, we come here this morning to remember who we are, women, living proof that you are alive in our midst. We come to be refreshed and renewed with a deepening sense of the sacred within us, to be reminded that we are not alone. This morning we send our woman spirit from our Sacred Heart space to the women of Ukraine, Gaza, Israel, Nicaragua, and all the places where women need to realize they are not alone. May it give them hope. O divine mystery, your presence is in every breath we breathe. We can hear it in the wind as it blows. It's there in the river as it flows into the lake. It lives in the laughter of children at play, in the blazing sun, and all the stars that shine in the darkness. We experience you in the smiles of our loved ones and in those who have loved us. Energizing Spirit, you are alive. We feel it all around us in this room today. You are the fire in our hearts. We know we are blessed, and we thank you. And as we gather this morning, allow us to feel your presence more intimately as we experience the blessing of each other and share our mutual yearning for a still deeper spirituality. May we then bring hope to our world.
That was a lovely way to start the morning. Thank you, Sister Sharon. My name is Dusty Krickow. I serve as the Director of Mission Advancement for the Congregation of Sisters of St. Agnes. You'll hear them referred to as CSA throughout the morning. Today, I will also serve as your MC. We are thrilled to welcome so many of you to this personal exploration of spiritual journeys, and I would like to take a moment to recognize CSA as the organization making today's event possible. The congregation has a long-standing relationship within the community, though as habits have changed over the years, it isn't quite as easy to recognize them in the grocery store. So, thank you. I appreciate that comment. If you are a Sister of St. Agnes, please stand if you are able. We appreciate your continued work in our community and the opportunity you have provided for us to come together today. The sisters have also inspired many people from all walks of life to join them in intentional relationship with the congregation. This committed group of people are referred to as associates. If you are in an associate relationship with the congregation, please stand if you are able. Thank you so much for joining us today, associates. Just yesterday, CSA celebrated Mother Agnes Day, recognizing the first General Superior of the Sisters of St. Agnes. Like all of us, Mother Agnes balanced her many responsibilities with connecting with her spiritual center. Just like you, her to-do list was long as she led CSA's work to open Fond du Lac's first hospital, open a school, farm the land, and provide spiritual guidance to the community. She knew that relationships, both new and old, were key to continued progress in both her tasks and in continued exploration of her spiritual self. And so we invite you in the spirit of Mother Agnes to spend this morning learning about yourself and about the new friends with whom you are seated. In the booklet at your seat, you'll find a list of questions on page 4. These questions are designed to help us with the task of exploration today. You'll have some time later in the program to consider all of them, but for the moment, I invite you to ponder, what is the central question of your life right now? We'll take 3 minutes on this question. First, take a quiet second, pick a sharing partner at your table. And if there's an odd number, hopefully you can make it work. For the first of our 3 minutes, our introverts will appreciate sitting in quiet contemplation. And so it will allow you to sit with your own thoughts as you ponder the question. When a minute has passed, I'll invite you to share your thoughts with your chosen partner. I'll indicate when that minute has passed for you to switch partners. And so, take a moment to adjust to a comfortable position and center yourself as we begin quiet contemplation. What is the central question of your life right now? Thank you. All right, so we've learned that you're not afraid to talk to each other. You will all find silence incredibly hilarious, because as soon as the silence was over, the roar of laughter in this room was very funny. If you work with the sisters, you get real comfortable sitting there in silence for way longer than a minute. All right, so that's the conclusion of our very first brief self-reflection. Rest assured, I know it wasn't long enough. And we will have more time for discussion later. So we know that that question and the others like it can be daunting, And because of that, we have guides to help us on existential exploration. Our first guide is Sister Rhea Emmer. Sister Rhea has companioned others in spiritual direction and retreats for more than 40 years. She has bolstered her expertise with a Master of Arts degree in Christian spirituality and a Doctor of Ministry in Creation Spirituality. To help you follow along with her during the presentation, you'll find notes on pages 2 and 3 of the booklet. They don't make much sense without the presentation, so you may want to scribble notes in the margin if you want to keep along and have some notes to remind yourself of later. And with that, please help me welcome Sister Rhea. It was bound down.
Thank you, Dusty, and good morning.
Good morning.
I always feel a little funny when she says I've been doing spiritual direction for 40 years, so I'm just going to say right now I was 3 when I started. Let that out right there. As I begin this morning, I would like to begin with a show of hands. How many of you saw these questions as spiritual questions and your sharing as a way of sharing your spirituality? Please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Or for those of you who just raised your hands, I want to say, welcome to the landscape of spirituality. And those of you who did not raise your hands, I would say, welcome to the landscape of spirituality. Because this question was inviting you to share your desire for deeper meaning in your life at this time. And meaning is a universal spiritual need. So you have already, whether you were conscious of it or not, meandered into this landscape of spirituality. And the landscape that I want to present this morning is really meant to be a mirror. So hopefully as you look into the mirror, first of all, you're going to recognize yourselves, hopefully. And secondly, that you will honor the beauty of your woman's soul that Sharon so lovely presented in her prayer, but also that you will claim the power and the depth of your spiritual journey as a woman. Excuse me. And given the time constraints, because we do want to have you have more time at your table later on, what I'm going to be presenting is going to be sound bites. That's it. And I'm going to go rapidly. So please follow along as much as you can. And I want to begin with some definitions of terms that are part of this landscape. And the first one is the term human spirit. Our human spirit is innate and it's universal. It's innate. It's part of our humanity. We have a body, we have a mind, we have emotions, we have a human spirit, and it is universal. Every single one of us has a spirit. None of us left it at home this morning. You all brought it into this room. She's been interacting with other women's spirits in this room. And if I gauge the energy in the room, I would say woman's spirit is alive and well at the Red Law. At least on the second floor of the Red Law. I have no idea what's going on in the first floor. The spirit is a dynamic life force energy that moves us toward greater wholeness and communion with a transcendent mystery that permeates all reality. Now that's a loaded definition, so I'm going to walk through the pieces of it. It's a dynamic life force energy. It's not static. And it moves us toward greater health, healing, and wholeness. Always is moving us toward deeper life. And especially when we're stressed, our spirit acts as an early warning sign. She says, slow down, pay attention, and listen to what's really going on inside. And of course, that's a challenge for us today because we live in such a fast-paced, technologically connected world. So this is a challenge for us. But it also calls us to be in communion with a transcendent mystery. Now, how each of us understands and names that transcendent mystery will be very different. And I suspect there's a lot of diversity here in the room. So the invitation this morning is to listen and learn. Listen deeply to one another and learn from one another. We don't have to agree. We don't all have to believe in the same thing. But we can always learn from each other. So the discerning questions that I would offer for this are, number one, how conscious am I of the Spirit? And in order to be conscious, we have to slow down. And we have to become more quiet on the inside, not just on the outside. So the question is, what helps me slow down and be quiet on the inside? And it can be any number of things. That might be one of the sharings you want to have at your table later on this morning. What works for you? The second term is spirituality. Now, there are many different definitions of spirituality. I'm going to offer you a very basic one. Spirituality is the way of life based upon our values and beliefs. It's a way of life. It's not something I do once or twice a day or once or twice a week. Our spirituality encompasses all of our ordinary life. It encompasses our joys and our sorrows, our angers and our fears, our blessings and the things that break us, our sensuality and our sexuality. All of it belongs within spirituality. And it's important that we examine our values and beliefs because it is particularly our belief systems that inform, nurture, and influence our choices. It informs our spirituality and it helps us define what does give us meaning and purpose in our life. It nurtures our spirituality because it helps us look at where do I get my belonging and my intimacy needs met. And it influences our choices, especially when we are confronted with suffering. And how am I going to respond to suffering in my life? And I believe suffering always opens up the doorway to the question of forgiveness. So I want to offer you look at three different belief systems in very broad strokes, because each one offers us a different window to our spirituality. And I believe we probably have representation of each of these within the room. And the first of these is the window of organized religion. And I've chosen the three monotheistic religions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. All three of these honor one God, but with three different names. So if I'm Jewish, I might use the word Yahweh or Elohim, or no name at all out of reverence for the divine. If I am Muslim, I am going to call God Allah. And if I'm Christian, we call God Jesus. And then within each of these religions, there are practices and rituals and a community of people that help support us within this understanding, looking through this window. What's interesting is all three of these monotheistic religions also have a mystical tradition. And the mystical traditions within religion are less concerned about dogma and doctrine, and rules and regulations. Mysticism wants us to know what is our deep, immediate experience of God. So the language you'll hear in the mystical traditions will sound more like sacred presence, holy wisdom, womb of all life. The mystical traditions are much more open to the masculine and feminine naming of our experience and the divine. And I believe for us as women, I'm suggesting we really need to honor the mystical traditions and the window that provides, because within the mystical traditions, the most common naming for God is beloved. Who is God? God is the beloved. Then who are we? We are the beloved of God. And I think we need to then say, as the beloved, we search for meaning and purpose. As the beloved, we look at our intimacy and belonging needs. As the beloved, we want to respond to suffering. This is the core of who we are. But somewhere along the line, people never told us that. That wasn't the message that we were given. This is one window. For others of us, the window might be a philosophy of life. This is the non-theistic view, and it often comes through the Eastern traditions. So we have Buddhism, Taoism, Taoism. And if any of you in the room are Buddhists, you know that this is the path of enlightenment. And the path of enlightenment is to awaken the Buddha that is within ourselves. And the essence of Buddhism is compassion. So all of their practices of mindfulness, awakening a compassionate heart, And the path of non-attachment is crucial for their understanding and living out of your spirituality. And then the last one is secular humanism. Again, secular humanism is non-theistic. And my atheist and agnostic friends tell me the window that they look through is knowledge, and particularly the natural sciences. Because the sciences, and I think this is why so many atheists are avid environmentalists, is because they have such reverence for the cycle of life in all of nature. So that is the window through which they look at meaning and purpose, belonging, and how they respond to suffering. So we have three different windows that support spirituality. The question I would ask for us to reflect on, if we wish, later on, is not so much what we believe, but what's the impact of what we believe. In other words, does my belief system expand my capacity to love myself and others, especially those who do not believe, look, or act as I do? In other words, does my spirituality expand my mind and heart so that my love is more inclusive? Or does my belief system constrict my mind and heart so that I am more fearful and critical and threatened by people who don't believe, look, or act as I do? And then my love becomes much more exclusive. And I believe this is such an important question for us today because we live in such a polarized world. And we have way too many holy wars going on our planet. And the third and last term I want to reflect on is that of the spiritual journey itself. And thank you, Dusty, for throwing my papers on the floor. You're welcome. We'll talk about forgiveness later. The spiritual journey is, again, and this is a layered definition, a lifelong process of inner growth to discover our true self and embrace union with that transcendent mystery, however we come to name that, in service to the world. Again, it's a lifelong process. It's not a one-time event. And it's an inner journey. It calls us to go down and in rather than staying up and out. To discover our true self. And again, why is this important? Because I believe we have been given many, many messages about what it means to be feminine, what it means to be a woman, that are simply not true. And they've been passed down to us from generation to generation to generation. And that's not a statement of blame, it's a statement of fact. So it's so important that we claim the beauty, again, of who we are on the inside so that we learn to trust her as we then move back out into the world. And again, in union with that transcendent mystery, however we have come to know her. So I want to talk about the phases of the spiritual journey, and again, this is really going to be sound bites. Hopefully, every one of us comes out of some kind of foundational integration as children, as young adults, as teenagers, in which we have a strong sense of identity, a strong sense of belonging, and some sense of a moral code. I know who I am, and I know how I want to be in the world as a woman. And that comes often because, actually it comes all the time, because we have internalized external messages as we're growing up. We got them from our family, our parents and our siblings. We got them from teachers and from peers. We got it from coaches, mentors, whoever had a significant influence in our life. And those messages will work for us until we're in our 20s, maybe even into our 30s or a little bit older. But they're unexamined often. It's like, well, this is what it means and this is how I'm supposed to live. And we don't think about it. And the values that are important at this time are the values of safety, security, certainty, and control. Now, I'm not talking about physical and emotional safety and security. Those are crucial. But that physical and emotional safety, security, and control then influences our spirituality. And we think, well, safety, security, and certainty, which means I'm right, and being in control all the time, well, that's how my spiritual life should go as well. And again, it's unexamined. We know, and hopefully every one of us in this room has come from that kind of foundational basis. But we also know of many women for whom that's not true. Their lives have been chaotic. There's been a lot of instability. There may have been a lot of abuse and addiction in these major influences in their life. So their spirituality is going to be more about survival, not just physically, but spiritually. And we need to honor, as we work with these women, knowing what their starting point is, because it's not going to be ours. But if we have had that foundational wholeness, if you will, then at some point in our life, we will have a spiritual awakening. And a spiritual awakening is simply a wake-up call to deeper growth and to inner deeper reflection. And you'll notice the image of the labyrinth. Now, I would love to stand up here this morning and say, the spiritual journey is a piece of cake. It's a smooth path, maybe a few bumps here and there, but you always have the control button. You never have to let go of that. Well, the chuckles tell us that you and I both know that's not true. And that's why I offer the image of the labyrinth, because the spiritual journey is not logical, linear, and sequential. It has a lot of twists and turns and a lot of switchbacks and a lot of unknown. And that unknown calls us to really come into a deeper sense of trust. And we use the word trust so flippantly, and yet it is a very, very difficult thing for us to learn, especially trusting ourselves and trusting our own inner goodness and trusting our own inner wisdom. And that spiritual awakening can come in many different ways, and take the word triggered off, I know that's a violent word, it's activated in many different ways. And sometimes it's activated through external crises. And those crises could be anything. It could be a health issue. It could be the sudden death of a loved one. It could be the loss of a job. It could be a betrayal of a friendship. Your partner or your spouse comes home and says, I don't love you anymore and I want a divorce. Or maybe you're the one who said, I can't live with this anymore and I want the divorce. So something happens out here and it basically stops us in our tracks and says, now what? Now where am I going to find meaning and purpose? Now where are my belonging needs going to be met? Now how do I deal with this suffering? For others of us, it doesn't come through a crisis from the outside. It comes more through what I call a midlife event. You're married, you have children, now everybody's gone and you've got the empty nest. And you look at your spouse and say, who are you? That could invite you into deeper reflection. Or I've heard some conversations earlier about, well, I'm thinking of retirement, or I just retired. And that also invites the now what question. And the even deeper question is, who am I now when I'm no longer whatever I was? And who am I if I'm no longer needed in the same way? Those questions often can lead us into the deeper journey. And there are others of us for whom it doesn't come through either of those ways. Life seems to be pretty stable out here, but we start to feel a restlessness inside. And that inner restlessness is saying, there's got to be more to life than this. And that plunges us into this deeper inner journey. So I know I really have to move forward, but this is a key section, so anybody sleeping, wake up. Because this is the way of disintegration. It's the path of disintegration. And remember, this is part of a healthy spiritual journey. This isn't pathological. There's nothing wrong with you. There is something so right, but it's very uncomfortable. So we have to learn to be comfortable with our uncomfortableness. Now, being unsafe is different than being uncomfortable. We always have to feel safe physically and emotionally, because everything's falling apart spiritually. Because all of those values of safety and certitude and being in charge and being in control, that's what's being asked to crumble. This happens in many different ways. This can happen just through the questions. Now what questions? Who am I questions? But it can also come as we examine our belief systems. Just because mom and dad said this, or the teacher said this, or the clergy person said this, doesn't mean it's true for you at this time. Now, if sister said it, you may want to consider that. Delete that statement. But I think for those of us who come out of organized religious belief systems, there's a lot of God questions that surface here. It's like, who is God? And if the God I've been given is the old man in the sky with the beard who demands perfection, who needs that? But the other one that I think is just as harmful is, oh, God is my best friend. And if I do all the right things, I'll never suffer. That's a setup. That's a setup. Sometimes our image of God gets in the way of our deeper experience of God. But this can be a scary place for many people. As we are doing this deeper dive into ourselves, we may uncover unhealed wounds from the past. We've all lived long enough that we've been hurt, rejected, ridiculed, misunderstood. And we've experienced grief and loss. And maybe as we experienced it, we didn't have time to cope with all the feelings because we just had to move through the event. But all of that unhealed pain is still inside of us. And as we do this inner reflection, it begins to bubble up. Why? Because the Spirit is saying, don't hang on to it anymore. Name it, claim it, so you can let it go. And that's especially true if, in the course of this reflection, you uncover any traumatic memory of any kind. Abuse, physical, sexual, emotional, spiritual. This is where we really need to give ourselves permission to get the professional help in order to have the support that we need. There's a lot of confusion and a lot of disillusionment, and my God, if that isn't enough, by the time we get into our 50s, we are invited to do shadow work. Now, we all know a lot about shadow work, and this could be another course, but it's that unconscious part that every one of us has as a human being that holds the potential for much greater good. And we have a capacity to do harm to ourselves, to one another, and to all of creation. The first one, the potential for good, we call the light shadow. And I think that surfaces as we're going through or after menopause. Because as our bodies are starting to dry up, you can't take the nurse out of me, I'm sorry. Our spirit says, but there is so much more potential in you to give life differently through creativity and generativity. We always have to be generative as women until we take our last breath. So what do you find yourselves doing in the 50s? You take an art class. You take poetry. You learn another musical instrument. You take Zumba. You learn to dance. Many, many different manifestations. You take a photograph class. All kinds of ways that this manifests. Because there's another part of you that wants to give life. But you haven't been able to do that because you've been busy raising a family or doing your career. So this is a very important thing for us to remember. The second part is the hard part, which is the dark shadow. And that's the part of us that can do harm to others. And I remember when my own spiritual director looked at me one day and she said, you know, Rhea, we all have an evil twin inside. And I swear she was looking right through me. We all have the capacity to lie, steal, cheat, that part of us that I believe surfaces when we are totally exhausted. We've been so busy focusing on the externals, we don't pay attention to what our spirit is saying. And then when we feel threatened and we lose control, this ugly little person shows up. We all have that. We all have our own manifestation of her. And we know that this is so difficult for us because there's so much shame wrapped around her. And we think this is the ugliest part of us, so we want to hide her or surgically remove her. And of course, we can't do either one. And if we don't do this shadow work, it will unconsciously, we will project it out on other people and on another individual. Think of racism. Think of sexism. Think of homophobia. How much is that is rooted in our inability to look at our own shadows? It's easier to blame them out here. Much easier. So, look at this mess that we're in. And how many of you are looking at this right now and saying to yourself, does this sound like fun? I can't wait to just jump right in there. And yet, this is the place of our deepest spiritual transformation and our birthplace of our deepest inner wisdom. Because what's happening here? Spiritually, we are being asked to die to former ways of thinking, believing, loving, acting, relating, so that there is space for something new to be born within us. So we're dying and we're birthing at the same time. Same time. The question is, what is our spirit doing for us in the midst of this? And if you don't remember anything else I say this morning, remember this. The first thing our spirit says to us is, you are not alone. That transcendent mystery, however you name that, is within you, helping you to move through this painful process of dying and birthing. And the second thing that our spirit does for us is she acts as an inner hospice worker and an inner midwife. She acts as an inner hospice worker because she's helping us die. She's helping us surrender the controls because they're getting in the way. And she's acting as a midwife. She's reminding us to stay open. Remember to breathe through the contractions of fear and sadness and wait for that new life to emerge within you. Hospice worker, midwife. And I believe every one of our traditions, belief systems, gives us a blueprint of this. If we're Jewish, you can look at this mess and say, oh, this is the story of the Passover. The Hebrew people going from slavery to freedom. For those of us who are Christian, we look at it and say, this is the Paschal mystery. And here we are in Lent. It's not just Jesus' journey, it's our Paschal mystery. If we're a Buddhist, this is the path of non-attachment and impermanence. And if you're a secular humanist, what this is saying to you is, oh, this is the autumn time of dying, as we move into the darkness and dormancy of winter, waiting for that new life to emerge. And the other image that comes to us from nature is that of the metamorphosis of the caterpillar to the butterfly. Talk about dying to an old form and birthing in a whole new form. So this process is all around us and it is deep within us. So what's our role? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to stay awake. Because as we're going through all of this dying stuff, we're going to want to numb out, run away, or shut down. And so what's going to help us stay awake? Because we have a choice. We cannot do the inner work. And then what we end up doing is simply adapting to the external world. But nothing changes inside. There's no transformation on the inside. So what helps us stay awake is spiritual reading. And by spiritual reading, I simply mean books that reflect back to us that this is a healthy, normal process for us. There is a book that everybody is raving right now called The Inner Work of Age, Shifting Role to Soul. A lot of women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s are saying, this book is a mirror for me, it's helpful. The other is read mystical poetry. Because again, mystical poetry helps to normalize the emotions that we're going through. And when I talk about mystical poetry, we can certainly talk about the classics of Julian of Norwich and Hildegard of Bingen and Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross. But there's also the modern day mystics, the poetry of Mary Oliver, the poetry of Edwina Gately, the poetry of Jan Richardson. Her book, Circle of Grace, is a wonderful companion for women. Or we can go to the Celtic poets, such as David White and John O'Donoghue. So let that help hold you in the space. Also, we need new rituals. Often people say at this time, I can't pray or meditate like I used to. That's right. You've got to find a whole different way of quieting and being still. Contemplation and sitting in silence becomes more helpful. And we have to claim the sacredness of our bodies at this time as well. Our bodies are more than a clothes rack. Our bodies can pray for us when we don't know how to pray, and it's through our breath. It becomes our prayer. And we need spiritual companions, but I will tell you, these spiritual companions are not people who are going to fix and rescue us. They're not going to be helpful. Oh, everything will be okay, Rhea. No, I don't need to hear that. I need people who are going to love me in my messiness and help hold the space with me as I proceed through the process. Because we are on a quest for deeper self-love, self-acceptance, and self-knowledge. In other words, this whole process is a homecoming to our true self that, again, nobody told us was there. So, why is this so important? And I'm coming to the end. Because we also have to recognize the pervasiveness of patriarchal systems everywhere. Every system we live, move, and have our being in is rooted in patriarchy. And patriarchy, by definition, is a system of male domination and abuse of power that is predicated on the belief that we as women are intrinsically inferior to men. And therefore we have no right to self-agency, and therefore we must live submissive to male power. We all know that's a lie, and we've been lied to for centuries. So as we do this inner reflection, this is going to serve us as well. And all I'll say to you is a lot of anger begins to surface within us. And that anger is a holy gift. Soundbite. It's also helpful to have a spiritual guide, and Sister Patrice is going to talk more about this later. So what is the new life that is coming forward? Talked about the dying, but what does the new life look like? Well, we have a new sense of self. We're freer to live our truth from the inside out. So we have a sense of inner empowerment that especially gives us the power to speak truth to power, not out of arrogance, but out of love. We embrace the paradoxes of life, so we're not so much in an all or nothing mindset, either or, but we can live in the both and-ness of life. And we're more comfortable with ambiguity instead of needing to rush to an action. We have a greater sense of humility, and that might be a surprise to some of you, but humility is truth. So we're more comfortable in who we are and who we aren't. We're more comfortable in our own soul skin. And so we don't have to compare and contrast ourselves with anybody. And a byproduct of humility is joy. And this is an inner joy that nobody can take from us. There's greater wisdom, there's greater resilience, and there is a greater capacity for discernment. Discernment is the ability to recognize truth from deception. And we all know that sometimes deception can come to us wrapped in a very pretty package. People are saying all the right words and all the right things. They're telling us what they think we want to hear. And they're doing it with a very kind look on their face. And everything within you says, this is BS. And that BS does not stand for blessed spirituality. I like to think of it as we develop our own inner crack detector. And she serves us well as we go through life. We develop an expanded social conscience. Why? Because as our minds and hearts open, we recognize the interdependence and interconnectedness of all life forms. And we are one. We're not the same, but we are one. And I believe, going back to Sharon's prayer, and we did not talk to each other beforehand about this, it helps us become prophets of hope in our hurting world. Not prophets of doom, but prophets of hope. And it deepens our union with the transcendent mystery. So what's the last thing I want to say to you? There is no graduation here. Why? Because life will continue to give us wake-up calls. But every time we go into this dying and birthing process, we come back stronger, more loving, more resilient, more compassionate. All those seeds that I talked about earlier, it just gets better. And I believe aging itself is a wonderful time of spiritual transformation. And the women in the 80s, 90s, and our hundreds have a tremendous amount of wisdom to share with us. But we're so preoccupied with the diminishment, physically and emotionally, that I don't know if we pay enough attention to all the wisdom they have and how to bring that forth, because they may not even recognize it in themselves. So the last question is, does my spiritual journey increase my capacity to live in inner freedom and to bring the power of this powerful transcendent love to our world? I have to stop. And I invite Dusty to come up and lead the process. Thank you.
That was a lot to take in. Thank you so much, Sister Rhea. We are going to try to be respectful of your time, but that was a lot to absorb, and we want to give you some time at your tables. So we will be doing our best to wrap up at 9:30, but I can't make any promises because we're a little bit behind. So for the next few minutes, we'll invite you to join in discussion at your table, considering some of the discerning questions that Sister Rhea posed, and potentially some of the additional questions on page 4 of your handout, or whatever it is that came to your heart while Sister Rhea was speaking. As mentioned earlier, we have more than one guide to help us on our existential exploration. So after a few minutes of discussion, 4 additional Sisters of St. Agnes, who are also spiritual directors, will come to the stage to offer their insightful responses to any questions you want to bring to the microphone. So just keep that in mind as you're having your conversation together. Again, we're going to begin with a full minute of quiet contemplation so that you can think about what you want to talk about at your table. So when the minute has passed, I brought this along. Oh, you took your glass. I was so ready. I was going to ding on the glass and the microphone. That's okay. All right. So let's start that 1 minute of quiet contemplation. We do have the room until 10 o'clock today, so we know that some folks need to leave at 9:30 though, so we want to be respectful of the fact that that's happening. So full biographies for our panelists are in your booklet. In the meantime, please help me welcome Sister Jean Hinderer, Sister Jo Zilke, Sister Patrice Rogg, and Sister Susan Seavey. So as you've likely noted, we have just a short time remaining in our formal portion of the program. If you'd like to ask a question, I am going to ask, unless you have a mobility concern, that you come to the stage area and I'll hand you the microphone. And we'll allow the panelists to respond to your questions, or if you have insights to share from your table, that is also welcome. Or we'll sit in silence. We have one. Thank you, brave soul.
I'd like to make a 20-minute speech now about my life. I was really struck by the sister's question to us, like, who am I now? And I'd like to invite you to talk more about that any way you'd like to explore here.
Thank you, Jane. I always say that in religious life, the things that have changed the most has been my waistline and my hemline. But I find that question, who am I now, is such a wonderful, rich question that needs to be prayed every day. Because we need to go into this inner sanctuary of ourselves, that inner space of ourselves, and take that question with us as a companion. But also we come out from that deepness every day to say, well, I'm different than I was yesterday. And if so, why? And how am I going to be today? I ask for the graces that I need to be who I am today, the beloved to other beloveds. Thank you. If I didn't know the answer, I would just say, please consult Rhea.
I like to think that during, as we go into middle age and maybe a little later, that there sometimes is a crisis or a concern that forces us to look at who are we in our deepest self and what do we really want for the second phase of our journey. And that Achilles heel that you might have keeps opening up. And you always have to face that. That's part of the shadow. And as we look at that problem, shadow, every time we are faced with it, we have to make a choice and we go deeper into ourselves. Or it's like peeling, a common analogy, peeling your onion, taking it into the core. So don't be discouraged if you find yourself facing the same problem, shadow, Achilles heel, because every time you do, you come to a deeper realization of who you are, and great humility comes with that.
Oh boy, how to follow all that. I think for myself, who I am now, I'm more retired than I had been, a few years ago. There have been other issues in life, like seeing more doctors than I want to, getting to know them on a personal basis sometimes. But seriously, it has also made me question more of what do I want to do in these last years of my life, and it may not even be years, God only knows. So trying to be more of that beloved, I love that image because that's how I try to live each day, to be more loving to other people around me and to be open to what God is speaking to me, sometimes in a very loud voice.
Wow, great to be last, huh? So I was a teacher and I taught religion in an inner city school, and I had a class of seniors and I was trying to get them to believe that they were loved, because that was the issue, day in and day out, not feeling loved and not loving themselves. And I remember I'm launched into, telling them about how God loves them and God is with them at all times, and this inner mystery is there and wants you to do well. And all of a sudden I looked in the corner of the room and one of the girls, her eyes were wide open and she was up, and I knew she got it. And I looked at her and said, well, what is it? And she said, even in the shower? And I said, yeah, even in the shower. The journey of your spiritual life takes you to the moments and invites you to the moments where who you are before mystery and before yourself and before others is who you are. And it's that hard, and Rhea's right, it doesn't just happen, but it's that vulnerability to really come to a point in your life where you love yourself. And you begin to recognize those things in your life that pull you from that. The moments when, the shadow takes over or the shame takes over. And so mystery, spirit is within. Can we be comfortable? Can we stand in the shower?
Thank you. In the interest of being respectful of your time, we had one question, but the spiritual directors will be here till 10 o'clock if you would like to talk to them. I am going to invite Sister Patrice to talk briefly about concepts of spiritual companioning, followed by Sister Susan, who will share about our Sisters and Seekers program.
Good morning. I just feel that energy too that Rhea was talking about. And I think your presence today and hearing all that Rhea shared with us can begin to stir some emotions in you, some feelings, some questions, some, I've got to do something about this. So if you are experiencing some of those significant changes in life, questions of life, looking again and saying, wow, why did I do that for so many years? It's about time to change. You may want to meet with a spiritual companion. I prefer that word than direction, because a director likes, to tell you what to do. A companion walks with you on the journey, and that's exactly what a spiritual companion would do for you. Spiritual direction has been described as the opportunity to journey with another to safely express and address our deepest needs, feelings, hopes, fears, dreams. And the purpose is to really help one another pay attention to the work that this Holy One is doing within our lives. Just to clarify, spiritual companioning is not religious education, where you might go to get some answers about your particular faith tradition or your beliefs and observances of that faith. It is not counseling or therapy. For example, dealing with anxiety and the causes of anxiety in your life. That is not spiritual companioning. And it is not pastoral counseling. In other words, trying to find from your own faith tradition answers to your particular problems. That is not spiritual companioning. So if you are interested in that, to look for someone who can help you face some of the challenges of life, especially if, I like that image that Rhea that you used of a hospice worker and a midwife at the same time, because that's what we're often doing. So spiritual companioning then is not finding comfort, also as Rhea said, but empowering you to embrace what is facing you in life in your journey with courage and wisdom and a renewed sense of yourself. So, how do you find, if you are so desiring, how do you find a spiritual director? I suggest that you try to find some and interview them to see if their training is what you works with your life, how they tend to their own spiritual growth, and most importantly, what are their ethical guidelines that they follow in their practice. Talk to a few, see what you feel comfortable with, and then trust your gut. Get that comfort level with a spiritual director if you so desire. Now, to help you, in your booklets that you have at your table, if you look at page 9, we have listed some resources for you. There are a good number of retreat centers in the area that would have somebody on staff who could be a director for you. Or this CSA, our phone number is also listed there, should you choose to contact one of us here. And on the next pages, 10 and 11, are some resources that may just help you individually. Technology can be a wonderful source, and that's what we're suggesting here with some of the ideas that are included in that booklet. So typically, if you choose to meet with a spiritual companion, some very practical ideas. First of all, appointments are usually set up for about a monthly schedule. And they typically last about an hour. There is usually a stipend that is offered to the director, and it's kind of a going rate from $40 to $70. But those are things you need to negotiate with the person when you meet with them. That can always be discussed. Just recently, I was praying one of the Psalms that seemed to fit so much with what spiritual companioning is, and that is that one line, you show us the path of life. And that is exactly what spiritual companioning is attempting to do, to help you walk that path of life. And so we will be around to discuss anything if you have any other questions. Thank you.
So what we would like to invite you to, if you're interested in continuing this spiritual conversation in a space that will honor contemplation, in a space that will honor intergenerational dialogue, in a space that is going to be concerned about the deeper question, but not just navel-gazing with a desire to reach out and spread that love out into the world. I'd like to invite you to grab one of these brochures. It says Sisters and Seekers. It is not a vocation brochure. We are not looking to make you into little nuns. Although, if there are any little nunny people out there, just here we are. But, you know, this is an invitation to join other women on a monthly basis, and we tried to pick either, I think it's the first Wednesday of the month, to come together in our Founders Hall and to create a safe space where we can have a relationship that is seeking to have diversity of background, to have diversity of generations, and to explore these things that we've explored this morning on a more contemplative, a more slow, a more deep level. So Sisters and Seekers will be starting next month, April 3rd, and we want to honor time, so it'll be like, I think it's 5:30 to 7. I'm leaving at 6, she's going to be there till 7. And it is Sister Rhea, myself, Barbara Murray, and then Sister Edie Cruz is going to help us with the administrative parts. So if you found this morning as nourishing for you, or if you think you'd like a cadre of women around you to help you do this journey in a contemplative way, with an eye towards moving into a greater connection in the world, please join us at Sisters and Seekers. And the brochure is on the table in the back. And I'll be up here if you have any other questions about it. So thank you everyone very much.
Thank you, sisters. Those resources, among others, are in the table just outside in the hallway. If you've enjoyed this morning's conversations, please remember that the room will remain open for you to continue reflecting and connecting until 10 a.m., though we recognize plenty of you have places to potentially depart to immediately. While all of us leave with energy from our morning, 19 lucky people, whose names were drawn at random from our attendees today, will get to take a little bit more with them. If I call your name, you may take home a centerpiece from any of the tables in the room. Dane Basley, Janet Smith, Mary Lou Schrader, Megan McNamara, Kate Vandenberg, Gwen North, Judy Vandergrinten, Mary Council Austin, Christina Lopez, Mary Jones, Lois Blum, Diane Dobnick, Carol McElry, Emily Conger, Ellen Beretta, Kelsey Biney, Diana Beck, Joanne Schmitz, and Mary Bolson. Thank you all for the privilege of your presence, and Sister Rhea will now come to do our closing reflection. Don't leave just yet.
We would like to close our time together with a blessing, and the blessing is in your booklet, and the blessing will also be on the screen. And we're going to use a song from Jan Nabata entitled, May All I Do Today. And it's a very simple mantra, and we're going to sing it 5 times. So as you hear the melody repeated, I would encourage you to sing along. And for those of you who are comfortable, I would invite you to enter into the hand gestures that are on the next page of your booklet as well, so that our whole being enters into this blessing. So when we sing the mantra for the first time, I would invite you simply to have your hands rest on the table with your palms up, as a way of receiving the blessing. When we sing it the second time, I would invite you to put your hands over your heart, as a way of not only blessing yourselves, but to know that you are a blessing. We sing it the third time, we would invite you to put your hands with the palms up, and then send the blessing through your eyes to the women at your table, so it's nonverbal. The fourth one, I invite you to extend your hands up, so that send the blessing out to the world, to whatever place, country, people that need your blessing today. And then the fifth time that we sing the blessing, I invite you to take your left hand up, palm up in a receiving position, right hand down in the sending position, and then just extend them over the hands of the people next to you without touching. We know COVID is alive and well, so we don't want to do that. But the blessing will be, you'll take in the blessing from the woman on your left, it'll pass through your heart, and then you will send that blessing to the woman on your right. So as we begin this, I would invite you just to take a moment and take a deep breath. A deep breath, bringing us from our minds to our hearts, and to our hearts to our woman's soul and our woman's spirit. As we begin.
May all I do today be for the healing of the whole. May all I do today mend a broken world. May all I do today bring blessing on the earth. May all I do today be for the good of all. All I do today.
Place your hands over your heart.
May all I do today be for the healing of the whole. May all I do today mend a broken world. May all I do today bring blessings on the earth. May all I do today be for the good of all. All I do today.
Rest your hands on the table and send the blessing to the women at your table through your eyes.
May all I do today be for the healing of the whole. May all I do today mend a broken world. May all I do today bring blessings on the earth. May all I do today be for the good of all. All I do today.
Extend your hands in blessing out to our world. Press your hands down, left hand palm up, right hand down, and extend it to the women on each side.
May all I do today be for the healing of the whole. May all I do today mend a broken world. May all I do today bring blessings on the earth. May all I do today be for the good of all. All I do today.
Rest your hands.
All I do today.
Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.